If this doesn't pull you in, nothing will. By the time the first set of pawprints appeared in the fresh snow where no dog should have been, former Navy SEAL Caleb Mercer was already standing alone on Black Ridge with a rifle slung across his chest, a dead radio in his pocket, and the sickening feeling that everyone had decided the truth was easier to bury than face. The wind moved hard across the mountain, cutting through pine and rock with a cold hiss that sounded almost human in the dark. Below him, the valley was nothing but black timber and drifting fog. Behind him, 3 men from the county search team were loading gear back into their trucks, their flashlights bobbing through the dusk like distant stars already turning their backs on the ridge. They had spent 6 hours up there humoring him. 6 hours checking old maps, scanning ravines, and walking circles around the same frozen slope, all because Caleb refused to accept what they kept saying in those careful, tired voices. There is nothing here. There was never anything here. And whoever you think went missing on Black Ridge, they did not vanish into a mountain. But Caleb knew better. He knew because Ghost knew better. The German shepherd stood 10 feet ahead of him, motionless, snow dusting his back and ears, his entire body locked toward a patch of untouched white between 2 wind-bent pines. Not barking. Not pacing. Just staring with that terrible, disciplined stillness Caleb had learned to fear more than gunfire. Ghost had been beside him in raids, storms, minefields, and one alley in Kandahar where the dog froze exactly like that 5 seconds before a boy stepped from a doorway with a pressure switch in his hand. Ghost never stared at nothing. He stared when something living, hidden, or deadly waited ahead. Caleb! One of the search men called from behind, voice thin in the wind. We're done. Light's dying. Caleb didn't turn. His eyes stayed on the dog. The man tried again. You heard the sheriff. Nobody believes there was a bunker on this ridge. That word hit like a blade dragged the wrong way. Believes. Caleb finally glanced over his shoulder. Sheriff Nolan Pike stood near the tailgate of the lead truck, gloved hands in his coat pockets, jaw set, face already wearing the expression of a man preparing to call the thing finished. Pike had been a friend of Caleb's late father. He'd known these mountains his whole life. And since morning, he had done one thing over and over again: look anywhere except the place Ghost kept returning to. We didn't find an entrance, Pike said. We found rock, trees, and old storm wash. That's it. Caleb turned fully then, snow creaking under his boots. His face was hard and wind-burned, beard lined with frost, eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights and too many years of learning what people called impossible right before the ground opened under them. No, he said quietly. You found what the ridge wanted you to find. Pike let out a slow breath. Your head's still in the war. That should have made Caleb angrier than it did. Instead, it just made the cold inside him settle deeper. Because he had heard versions of that sentence for years now. After the failed mission. After the inquiry. After the body of his teammate Ryan Cole was never recovered from a blast site 40 miles south of here. After Caleb kept insisting Ryan didn't die where the report said he died. After he spent months chasing scraps of satellite static, bad coordinates, and one single distorted audio clip that sounded like Ryan's voice saying the words Black Ridge. Below the stone line. No one believed him then either. The wind rose. A loose branch knocked somewhere deeper in the trees. Ghost's ears twitched, but he didn't break his stare. Pike stepped closer to Caleb, lowering his voice. Listen to me. I know you want Ryan alive. I know guilt can make a man hear things. But there is nothing under this ridge. Ghost growled. It was low. Short. Not at Pike. At the snow. Caleb looked down instantly. The patch between the pines had changed. A moment ago it was smooth, untouched, wind-combed white. Now 5 dark impressions marked a line across it, pawprints. Fresh. Sharp. Deep enough to break through the powder and expose older crust beneath. Caleb's pulse kicked. They were Ghost's size. Ghost's stride. But they were not where Ghost had walked. The dog had never crossed that patch. Caleb knew because he had been watching him the whole time. One of the search men laughed uneasily behind him. More dog tracks. Great. Caleb didn't answer. He crouched and aimed his flashlight low across the snow. The beam stretched the prints long and narrow. 4 prints. Then a 5th. They went forward 6 feet and stopped at a drift piled against the base of a black stone outcrop. No return tracks. No side break. No sinkhole. Just prints that walked into snow and vanished. Ghost moved at last. One slow step. Then another. He came to Caleb's side, lowered his nose near the first print, and gave a sharp whine that lifted every hair on Caleb's neck. Not confusion. Recognition. Pike saw it too. Caleb knew because the man's silence changed shape. Back up, Caleb said. From what? Pike asked. Caleb didn't look at him. He brushed his glove lightly over the edge of the drift where the prints ended. Beneath the powder, under the first layer of fresh snow, the white gave way too fast. Not ground. Not packed rock. Hollow. He swept more away. His glove struck metal. Everything in him went still. There, beneath the ridged snow, lay a curved steel surface painted matte black and nearly invisible under frost. Not natural. Not old debris. Too smooth. Too deliberate. A seam ran through it in a perfect arc door seam. One of the men behind him whispered, "What the hell?" Pike took 2 steps forward before Caleb snapped, "Don't." Too late. Pike's boot came down beside the prints. A click sounded under the snow. Small. Precise. Mechanical. Ghost exploded sideways and slammed full force into Pike's knees. The sheriff went down hard with a curse, rolling back just as a shaped charge punched upward from the drift where his next step would have landed. Snow, dirt, and shards of rock blasted into the air with a brutal, tight concussion. The search men screamed and dropped. One truck alarm started blaring in the distance. When the smoke-like snow cloud cleared, a crater the width of a grave yawned open beside the exposed steel curve. No one spoke. Ghost stood over Pike, barking savagely now, front paws planted wide, body between the man and the hidden seam like he understood exactly what had almost happened. Caleb's breathing came hard and white in the dark. He moved to the crater edge and shone his light down. Metal fragments. Pressure housing. Trigger plate disguised under shallow snow. Freshly armed. Someone had set a live defensive charge on Black Ridge. Not years ago. Recently. Pike got to one elbow, staring at the hole where his leg should have been. He looked up at Caleb, and for the first time all day the sheriff's face was stripped clean of dismissal. "You were right," he said. Caleb didn't answer because he was looking past the crater now. The blast had peeled away more snow from the outcrop, enough to reveal the shape beneath it. A buried steel hatch, wide enough for a man, bolted into the ridge itself. Half hidden under stone and years of weathering. The vanished pawprints ended directly above it. One of the search men backed away. "We need federal support." "No," Caleb said. Pike stared at him. "No?" Caleb rose slowly. "If this is what Ryan found, and if someone armed it after he disappeared, then the wrong call gets the right people erased before sunrise." "How do you know that?" Caleb's gaze stayed on the hatch. "Because that's how men like this survive." Ghost stopped barking and pressed close to the steel seam. Then, very gently, he pawed once at a narrow strip of frozen dirt to the left of the hatch. Caleb's flashlight found a second detail. Blood. Not much. A smear along the edge where snow had crusted over it. Fresh enough that the cold hadn't turned it fully brown yet. Somebody had opened that hatch. Or tried to. "Caleb," Pike said, voice tight now. "If somebody's inside." A sound rose from beneath the metal. All 4 men heard it. Not machinery. Not wind in a pipe. 3 hard knocks from underground. Then silence. The mountain seemed to stop breathing. One of the search men stumbled backward and crossed himself under his breath. Pike's face went gray. Ghost barked once into the seam, then flattened his ears and looked up at Caleb with a fierce, urgent intensity that said the same thing the dog had been saying from the first second he stopped on that ridge. Now. Caleb dropped to one knee, brushed more snow off the hatch, and found the recessed wheel lock built into the steel. Military. Heavy. Old, but maintained. Not abandoned. Hidden. Preserved. Waiting. Pike crouched beside him. If there's someone alive under there, we need cutters, extraction gear, medics. Another sound interrupted him. Not from below this time. From the trees uphill. A single crunch of snow under a careful boot. Caleb's head snapped up. Ghost spun toward the dark pines, growling deep enough to shake in his chest. There, between the trunks, a figure stood half hidden in moonlight and blowing snow. Tall. Motionless. Watching them. One hand lifted near the face as if pressing a radio earpiece. The figure didn't run. Didn't speak. Just watched. Then vanished back into the trees. Pike reached for his sidearm. Caleb caught his wrist. No shots. Why not? Because if he's watching the door, he's not alone. That truth landed on all of them at once. The live charge. The hidden hatch. The blood. The knocks from below. The watcher in the trees. Black Ridge had never been empty. Ghost turned back to the steel seam and gave one sharp, aching bark. Then the knocking came again from under the buried door. This time it was faster. Desperate. And just as Caleb reached for the wheel lock, a voice rose from beneath the hatch, muffled by steel, faint from depth, but unmistakably human. Don't let them seal it again. Caleb's hand stopped on the frozen wheel lock. For one hard second, nobody moved. The voice under the hatch had not sounded weak the way trapped voices usually did. It had sounded urgent. Controlled. Like whoever was below had spent too long staying alive in the dark and knew exactly how little time was left. Don't let them seal it again. Ghost barked once and slammed his paw against the steel. Pike looked at Caleb, his face pale under the moonlight. You heard that. Caleb didn't answer. He was already moving. He jammed both hands onto the wheel lock and pulled. The metal didn't budge. Help me, he snapped. Pike hesitated only a fraction of a second before grabbing the opposite side. The two searchmen stayed back near the trucks, rifles half raised, eyes fixed on the tree line where the watcher had disappeared. The wheel turned 1 inch. A deep mechanical groan rolled through the ridge. Ghost swung toward the pines and growled again, lower now, more dangerous. Caleb felt that sound in his spine. It meant the watcher hadn't left. It meant he was closer. Faster, Caleb said. Pike pulled harder. This thing's buried. Then rip it out of the mountain. The wheel gave again. Frost cracked loose around the seam. A burst of stale air hissed up through the opening, cold, metallic, and wrong. Not cave air. Not soil. Conditioned air gone rotten after too many years underground. The voice came again, closer now through the widening crack. There's a second lock. Left side. Under the snow. Caleb dropped immediately, swept his glove through the drift beside the hatch, and found a recessed latch plate hidden under packed ice. Not old rust. Recently greased. That sent a colder kind of fear through him. This door had been maintained. Ghost backed off 2 steps and barked straight into the trees. One of the search men flinched and aimed his rifle uphill. I saw movement! Don't fire blind, Caleb snapped. He drove the latch hard. It jammed, then released with a brutal metallic crack. The hatch rose half an inch. Something moved under the steel, light, faint and yellow, like an old emergency bulb breathing in the dark. Then the mountain answered. A shot cracked from the tree line. One of the search men cried out and spun backward into the snow, clutching his shoulder. The second dropped behind a stump and fired twice uphill. Muzzle flashes lit the pines for a split second, then vanished. Contact! Pike shouted. Ghost launched before Caleb could stop him. The German shepherd tore uphill through the snow like a black blade, disappearing between the trunks as another suppressed shot snapped through the cold and shattered bark above the hatch. Caleb dropped flat beside the steel door, pistol up, heart hammering. Pike dragged the wounded man toward the truck while the other searcher kept firing in short panicked bursts. Too loud. Too wild. Caleb knew instantly they were losing control. From under the hatch, the voice rose again, sharper now, desperate. "They'll lock the inner chamber." Caleb looked down into the crack. "Who are you?" A pause. Then, "Not who you need right now. Open the door." That answer hit him in a strange way. No begging. No wasted words. Whoever was down there understood pressure. Maybe military. Maybe law enforcement. Maybe something else entirely. But not helpless. Another shot hit the steel hatch and sparked over Caleb's shoulder. Pike slid in beside him, breathing hard. "We can't hold this ridge." Caleb's eyes stayed on the seam. "Then we don't hold it. We get the door open first." "That's insane." "Yes." Ghost's barking exploded somewhere higher in the trees, followed by a man's scream cut short so suddenly it made both men freeze. Then silence. Not good silence. The kind that comes right before something worse. Caleb holstered the pistol, got both hands under the hatch lip, and pulled with everything he had. Pike cursed and joined him. The steel lifted another 6 inches, enough for snow to pour into the black opening below. Yellow light climbed slowly up from beneath. A ladder. Concrete shaft. And one human eye staring up through the gap. Caleb nearly let go from pure shock. A woman stood on the ladder, one hand braced on the rung, face half hidden by shadow and rising vapor. She looked thin, bruised, and exhausted, with dark hair cut roughly to the jaw and one cheek marked by an old yellowing bruise. But her eyes were sharp. Too sharp for someone who had given up. "Don't stop now," she said. Pike stared. "Jesus Christ." The woman looked past them toward the gunfire in the trees. "How many are topside?" "3 of us still standing," Caleb said. Her expression tightened. "Then you're already short." That told him enough. She knew exactly what kind of people were out there. Another suppressed round snapped off the hatch rim and showered them with sparks. "Name?" Caleb demanded. The woman hesitated. Not from fear. From calculation. Then she said, "Dr. Mara Ellison." The name meant nothing to Pike. To Caleb, it hit like distant thunder. He'd heard it once before. Not in person. In a classified annex he was never supposed to see during Ryan Cole's disappearance review. 1 footnote. 1 transferred specialist. 1 vanished witness. He looked at her harder. "You were attached to Site 12. Her face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. "You know that name?" she asked. Before Caleb could answer, Ghost came out of the trees dragging a black-clad man by the arm. The attacker was still alive barely. Snow and blood covered his jacket. His rifle was gone. Ghost slammed him to the ground near the trucks and stood over him, barking with savage triumph, while the wounded searcher tried to crawl out of the line of fire. Pike raised his pistol and rushed over. "Don't move!" The man laughed through bloody teeth. Caleb hated that laugh instantly. Because it was the sound of someone who believed the worst part had not happened yet. Mara heard it too from below the hatch. Her face went white. "Get away from him," she said. Pike turned. "Why?" Mara gripped the ladder harder. "Because if they send recovery first, then the dead man won't be far behind." Caleb's blood ran cold. "What dead man?" The captured attacker smiled wider. Then, very slowly, he lifted one gloved hand from the snow. In his fist was a small black trigger. Thumb already resting on the switch. Ghost lunged. But not fast enough. The man pressed it. And somewhere deep under Black Ridge, a second buried door began to open. Caleb Eni Pike Ki Ankhun Main Deka, Furkule Hatch, Kunesi Biggie Baraf, or Ghost Katana Huajism Ki Taraf, or USI Palyase Samaje A Gayaka Black Ridge Absearch Mission Nahiraha the Ya Exinda Jang Ti Jahan Har Second Jishi Ko Daba Sakta the Pike, Apni Admi Ko Trucks Tak Lejao. Us thandi lekin kat ti huia was main kaha. Back up bulo, lekin jishi parbarosa mat karna jo sol kam or orders sayada dita ho. Pike any foran inka karna chaha, lekin nache kule steel hse for wohitin tes nakse, for dudimi, or for ek orit kia was, peli se kams or magra zayada bechan. Agar tum yuper hai lad rahi to wo bishon ko lejanj. Ya laughs hawa ko kod gay. Caleb juk kar hach kapas aya. Andar se zard emergency roshni main ek patla sa chera nazar aya. Dr. Mara Ellison. Enkhan kagurd kale halke, gal par purana nishan, sans bari, lekin dimag pura hash main. Bachi? Caleb any pucha. Sublevel B. Mara any sita jawab dia. Yes surf holding sight nahi, transfer spine high. Agar trigger dab gaya high to unhun any secondary doors called dihum. Upper jo log tumpar fire car rahi hain, will cover team high. Asal calm nache ho raha high. ISI door in upper ridge line se suppress round truck kahud par logi or dat ki cheek hawa main fail gai. Ghost any gur car sita pines ki teraf jak kalia. Caleb any uska harness pakra, lekin yuse mesuz wakudog ka pura jism ek compass banchuka high, jays yuse malum ho kagolian asal katra nahi, whacked high. Pike any wounded searcher ko gasit car truck ki teraf lajana shurakia, dusra admi cover fire deraha the, or Caleb any hatch kawillak ko puri takat se gamaya. Mara any andar se dusra latch release kia. Steel any dardanak abari or hatch pura uthgaya. Thandi basi, chemical hawa ka daka uparaya. Nache concrete shaft the, jili diwarian, rung ladder, or kahin or andar machinery ki dimi dadkin. Main nache ja raha hun. Caleb any kaha. Pike any uska bazu pakra. Yes suicide high. Caleb any uski giraffe narmi se churali. Ryan bisi ridge kunache gaya the. Main dusri dafa yuse ahir main akela nahi korunga. Us any ghost ko ishara dia. German shepherd bina hitchkichahad kapeli ladder par yudergaya, for Caleb, for Mara jo mushkil se apni takat jama kar rahiti. Nache pahunkti highways ki denaya badal gai. Yupper ki hawa pines, trucks, sap piche re gay. Observe steel ki gunj, paani ki hockey rani, purani antiseptic smell, or red emergency strips ki intermittent chamak ti jo corridor ko zakmi dadkin ki terra roshan kar rahiti. Ghosts for and left passage ki teraf mud gaya or faruka, nak zamin kukarib, for hawa main, for dobara zamin par. Wo drag sent red kar raha hai. Mara any dimi awaz main kaha. Unhan any jishikeo yahan se move kia hai. Shayad ek se zayada. Caleb ka dimag har detail note kar raha the, wall p purane stencils, service feed, medical, containment access. Or unparne black paint ko patch, jays jishi any asal history ko chupain ki koshish ki ho. Pela corridor ek chodi junction room par kadam hua jahan ek overturned cart. Ek tute humanitor or floor par kun ki patli laker sita dusser passage ki teraf jau rahiti. Ghostus laker kusath chow pada. Caleb any ek jiri hu access badge ko athea. White plastic card par koinam nahi the surf code, S12/transit. Site 12. Usnapni Danton kudarmi and kaha. Mara any uski teraf deka. Usnauzar kusath jo batati hai ku admi any wo nam surf suna nahi, jila hai. Tum is nam ko pechanti ho. Caleb any foran jawab nahi dia. Wo bas ige barha. Jis cheese kaas and salin tak pichikia the, wo up concrete or steel kishakal main uski samni sans lurahiti. Egel more par unhain palizinda sabut mili. Ek koda sa will blanket floor par pada the, jila, gasita hua, or us par bashon ku cartoon stars bane huthe. Uski bilko karib ek injection cap or ek tape strip chipki hui ti. Ghost any blanket ko sunga. Versita age dek kar ek daba hua wine nikala. Ye awaz Caleb any surf tab suni ti jab dog ko kutra or masumiat ek hai jaga mesuz hodi ti. Wo karib hain. Caleb any kaha. Mara any sir hila dia. Or zinda. First speakers crackle hue. Static kubad ek orit ki calm, machine JC Awaz corridor main fail gai. Recovery teams, confirm juvenile package count. East transfer route in 3 minutes. Caleb Kajism and RSE Baraf Ban Gaya. Juvenile package. Bachi and Logon Kalia Log Nahi, shipment they. Ghost any foreign bar Kia or service great Kukarib Ja Kar Zamin Kurikni Laga. Caleb Gutnan Kubal Batha or Beam Great Se Nache Dali. Nache ek lower passage the Zyada wide, Zyada Roshan, or us main movement. Chode pair. Bare feet. Ek bachi ka shadow jo jishi bade admi kusath kasidi jarahi ti. Caleb kudil ki dadkin it nizor se lagi kiyuse apni san sunai dina band hogai. Nache Jane ka rasta? Us Mara se pucha. Mara any room ka right wall par ek maintenance ladder shaft dikaya jo half concealed panel kapiche the. Wahan se. Caleb any panel toda, ghost ko peli beja, or kud nache utergaya. His level par hawa or biburi tea, metal, coolant, stale medicine or dard. Nache uterud hyas and peli bar un bishon ko's soft deka. Charchod bachi ek line main kari thay, wrists par white bands. Enkhan main wo kamash dar jo surf un bishon main hoda hai jihain rona be disciplined kukalaf sakaya gaya ho. Unk AAS pas mat black uniforms main do armed men or ek white lab coat wali or at t jo tablet paker kuri ti. Lekin Caleb ki nazarun par jam kar nahirahi. Uski nazarus admi par ja ruki jo chamber ka en par kara the. Side profile red warning light main ada dik raha the. Beard zyada lambi. Chera patla. Lekin shoulders, garden ka jukeo, or kari hon ka andas. Us peli usi surf ek admi main deka the. Ryan Cole. Ryan, jiska body kabi nahi mila. Ryan, jisk liya report any lika the presumed killed. Ryan, jiska nam Caleb any har sal baraf kurt wakt kud se dobara pada the. Ryan any tablet li, kuch kaha, fur jays jishi any yise dek liya ho, us nakanak sar uthakar sita observation slit ki taraf deka. Unki enken mili. Dor se, glass kuas par, salen kujut kudarmian. Ryan ka chera ek lam ko pathar sa ho gaya. Furus bohat ista, bohat John buj kar apni ungli hantan par rakdi. Chup. Caleb ka gala sup gaya. Mara any uska bazu pakra. Tum yuse janti ho. Caleb any bas fasan jc awaz main kaha. O marchuka the. Yahan bohat log paperwork main marchuk hain. Mara any jawab dia. Isi pel ek chodi bachi line se hili. Asnapna sar side kia, ghost ko slit kunache deklia, or uski ankhan main peli bar rashni jc cheese jolly. Wo baraf si kamoshi main fusfusai. Dog. White coat wali orit any foran uska wrist pakra. Bachi sikad gai. Ghost ka gurana nagara ho gaya ka Caleb ko laga wo panel tad dega. Chamber ka anda Ryan nebs movement ko deka. Uska chera thoda sa badla. Regret yashak, Caleb samaj nahi saka. White coat wali orit any bina gabre kaha. Accelerate transfer. Exterior breach confirmed. Mara kaha thanda ho gaya. Dr. Helena Sloan. Usan fusfasaya. Agar wo yahan hai to fur koi bi bakcha safe nahi. Caleb ka dimag teen rastan par ek south bog rahada, bishon ko foren nikalo, Ryan tak pahanko, yadata or proof secure karo. Lekin fur ek or micro hook any sab kuch ta dia. Chodi bachi, jisa white coat wali any kencha the, uska band thoda mud gaya. Emergency light nes parnam chamkaya. Mila Vance. Vance. Caleb ka jism sita jam gaya. Vance uski unit ya county kanam nahida. Wo uski family line t. Wo uski behen Emily ka surname the. Emily, Joe's sat sal peli winter crash main margai t. Closed casket. Jaldi daffin. Kadam. Caleb eni dobara deka, is dafa yakin karn kuliya nahi, tutan kuliya. Wristband kunache koda print be the maternal contact, e. Vance. Hawa uski sin esi niko gai. Bachi eni dobara ghost ke odeka. Versita observations sit ki teraf. Jays yuse messes ho gaya ho kakoi yuse dek raha hai. Usen halka sa apna hathathea. Koda. Kamta hua. Madad kuliya nahi. Pechan kuliya. Aslam Caleb eni samaj liya ka Black Ridge eni yise surf Ryan tak nahi balayada. Yajaga uski past kahar kabar keo kal rahiti. Ghost eni slit par panjamara. White coat wali eni sargamaya. Red alarm light uski chair par padi. Uski ankan sita unki teraf uthgain. There in the wall. Usen bilkal aram esi kaha. What chamber could do armed men ex south unki taraf mudgay? Caleb froze the second that child's voice whispered, "Mom?" from the darkness ahead, and beside him Mila went so still it felt like even her fear had stopped breathing. Ghost's ears snapped forward. Mara's face changed instantly, not confusion, not doubt, but recognition sharp enough to hurt. "They moved them faster than I thought," she said, and before Caleb could ask what she meant, the red-lit tunnel ahead gave a low hydraulic groan and a hidden panel in the right wall slid open 3 inches with a hiss of stale air. A smaller passage lay beyond it, half-flooded and lined with old conduit, and from somewhere deeper inside came the muffled sound of children crying, one voice trying to shush the others, another repeating "Mom," in frightened little bursts that made Mila's fingers clamp harder around Ghost's fur. Caleb's whole body tightened. The mountain was not just hiding children. It was sorting them, moving them, breaking them into routes and numbers and sealed rooms. Behind them, another blast door slammed shut, louder this time, and the concrete under their boots trembled as if Black Ridge itself was trying to decide which part of its own weight to drop first. "Move!" Caleb said, voice low but absolute. Mara led the children through the opening while Caleb took the rear for 3 steps. Then changed his mind and moved back to the front because Ghost had stopped halfway into the side passage and was staring into the dark with that terrible rigid stillness that always meant unseen danger. Caleb dropped to one knee beside him and aimed his light low. Wet footprints. Small. Barefoot. At least 4 sets, crossing left to right in a hurry. Over them, larger prints, boots, clean tread, disciplined spacing. Recovery team. "They just came through here," he said. Mara nodded once. "This branch used to feed intake overflow to the lower medical ward." Caleb looked at her sharply. "Used to?" Her answer came flat and ugly. "Places like this never stop being what they were. They only change labels." Another child whimpered deeper in the passage, closer now, and Mila suddenly pulled away from Caleb and took 2 steps forward. "Mom?" she whispered, voice breaking on the word. Ghost moved with her instantly, body against her legs, but his growl deepened. He wasn't warning her away from the crying. He was warning her away from something hiding behind it. Caleb understood at once. Bait. Or worse, children placed where others would come to them. He reached for Mila's shoulder. "Stay behind me." She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes and the kind of desperate faith no adult deserves without earning. "What if she's there?" He swallowed once and said the only truth he could afford. "Then I'll bring her out." That answer was enough for her to nod, but only barely. The passage opened 20 feet later into a low chamber lit by one flickering white strip overhead. 3 children huddled against the far wall, barefoot, shivering, eyes huge under the pulse of emergency light. A 4th child, older, stood in front of them with a broken piece of metal pipe in both hands like he planned to defend them with it if he had to. No guards. No med carts. No visible sensors. That was what made Caleb more suspicious, not less. Nothing in this mountain had been left by accident. Ghost stepped into the room first, nose working the floor and corners, then the vent seam, then the ceiling. His growl dropped lower when he reached the drain grate in the middle of the room. Caleb's flashlight hit it a second later and found the glint of something fine stretched across the metal. Wire. Not a mind trigger this time. Sensor filament. Step on the wrong plate, break the wrong line, and somewhere ahead the whole route would announce them. Mara saw it too and shut her eyes like she was sick of being right. "Sloan," she whispered. She always leaves one thing that looks merciful. Caleb crouched, cut the filament with the smallest motion he could manage, and looked up at the children. How many more? The older boy with the pipe didn't answer immediately. He studied Caleb first, then Ghost, then Mila. Finally he said, They took 2 girls down to Pump 9. 1 woman too. Mila made a sound too small to be called a cry, but Caleb heard the hope inside it like a wound reopening. Was one of them named Emily? He asked. The boy blinked. I heard them say Vance. That was enough to move everybody at once. Mara gathered the smaller children, Eli took the pipe boy and the others, and Caleb turned towards a lower tunnel leading deeper under the ridge. But before he could step through, the wall speaker above them crackled and Sloane's voice filled the room, softer now, more intimate, which made it worse. Owen. Then static. Then a correction, smooth and cold. Caleb Mercer. If you are hearing this, then you've already chosen the wrong branch. The Vance child is not your rescue. She is your leash. Mila went white. Caleb felt every child in the room look at her. Ghost barked once, hard enough to cut the speaker's poison in half, and stood directly in front of Mila like a living shield. Caleb's face went hard. Good, he said quietly. Now I know what she's scared of. Another tremor rolled under the floor, stronger this time, and far below them a deep metallic boom answered through the pipes. Pump 9. The mountain was closing. Caleb looked at Mara, at the children, at Mila clutching Ghost, and then down the black tunnel where Emily might still be breathing. No one gets left, he said. Not tonight. Then he raised his weapon, signaled Ghost forward, and drove the entire line deeper into the dark toward the one room Helena Sloane was desperate to reach first. The lower tunnel to Pump 9 felt less like part of a building and more like the inside of something buried alive, a long concrete artery breathing cold through cracked vents while black water dragged at Caleb Mercer's boots and red emergency lights pulsed over the walls like a dying heartbeat. Ghost moved ahead in short, controlled bursts, never too far from the line of children, then back again to Mila, brushing her leg with his shoulder every few steps as if he knew the mountain wanted her more than anyone else. Caleb kept counting under his breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then counting again because losing track of a child in a place like this would be the kind of mistake a man spent the rest of his life bleeding from. Mara Ellison stayed near the center, one arm around the smallest girl, face pale under the red light but eyes sharp, while Eli and the older pipe boy helped pull the weaker kids through the runoff. No one spoke unless they had to. That silence made the next sound hit harder. A woman coughed somewhere ahead. Not over the speaker. Real. Wet. Strangled. Mila heard it too and stopped so suddenly Caleb nearly ran into her. Mom! She whispered, and Ghost's growl rolled up at the same instant, low and warning, the kind that meant yes, someone was there, but not safely. Caleb raised one hand and the whole line froze. He listened. Water dripped. Metal ticked somewhere overhead. Then came another cough, followed by the scrape of something heavy being dragged over steel. Not footsteps. A chair. A wheeled stretcher. A body being moved. The corridor bent left, widened, and ended at a half-open security shutter jammed 3 feet above the floor. Harsh white light spilled under it, cutting a bright wound across the dark tunnel. Caleb dropped to one knee and crept to the gap. Ghost came beside him, ears rigid, muzzle trembling, his body fighting every instinct to launch. Through the gap Caleb saw Pump 9. It was bigger than he expected, a circular chamber 2 stories deep with rusted catwalks, vertical filtration tanks, thick pipe clusters, and a central pump well churning black water far below. White work lights fought with the flashing red alarms and turned everything into cold, violent contrast. 2 masked recovery men stood near a restraint frame bolted to the floor rails. Another worked a control tablet beside a steel medical cradle. And strapped upright against that cradle, wrist secured, face bruised, hair wet and hanging loose over one eye, was Emily Vance. For 1 second Caleb's brain refused to accept what his eyes were telling it. Then Mila made a broken sound behind him and tried to crawl under the shutter. He caught her just in time, one hand locking gently but hard around her shoulder. Emily heard it anyway. Her head snapped toward the sound with the raw, terrified speed of a mother who had spent too long expecting hope to be used against her. She saw Mila first. Caleb knew because the change in her face was immediate and devastating, fear shattering into disbelief, disbelief into love, and love into the kind of panic that comes when the only thing worse than losing your child is seeing her brought into the same trap. "No!" Emily shouted, voice cracked but strong enough to turn the whole chamber. Every masthead swung toward the shutter. Caleb dropped flat as the first burst of gunfire ripped into the concrete above the gap, showering him and the children with powdered cement. Ghost barked once, feral and explosive. Mara dragged the nearest children back into the curve of the tunnel, while Eli covered the younger ones with his own body. Caleb fired twice under the shutter, forcing the closest recovery man off the tablet station, then looked at Mara. "Can you get the children back to the branch room?" She understood the real question instantly. "Can you keep them alive if I go in?" Her face tightened. "For a minute," she said. "Maybe two." That was all the time he was ever going to get. Emily was already fighting the restraints, blood running down one wrist where she twisted too hard. The control tablet had fallen sideways, its screen still lit, and on it Caleb saw something that made his pulse turn to ice, a countdown running under the label Juvenile Transfer Override. Sloane hadn't been planning to hold Pump 9. She had been planning to use it as the last extraction point before the mountain sealed. And then Caleb saw the second thing. Hanging from the cradle beside Emily, clipped to a white medical chain, was a silver capsule identical in shape to the one hidden under Mila's shirt. 2 capsules. Not one. Whatever Sloane was after, Mila had only half of it. The mystery hit him with such force he almost missed the voice coming over the chamber speakers. "You've done enough damage for one night, Chief Mercer," Helena Sloane said, calm as winter glass. "Send the child in, and I may let the mother live long enough to see her." Caleb's grip on the pistol hardened. Mila had gone utterly silent behind him. Ghost turned his head just enough to look back at her, then forward again at the chamber, as if even the dog understood the cruel shape of the choice they were being forced into. Caleb leaned close to the floor and shouted under the shutter, "Emily! Don't move!" Emily laughed once through pain, eyes fixed on the gap where she knew Mila was hiding. "That's a little late for orders, Caleb." The familiarity of his name from her mouth almost broke something in him. Then the lights in Pump 9 flickered, the pump well below gave a deeper metallic groan, and one of the vertical tanks on the far side began to drain, revealing not machinery inside, but another row of locked containment pods stacked behind the glass like the mountain still had more children it hadn't finished swallowing. Ghost's growl became a snarl. Caleb stared through the gap at the hidden pods, at Emily chained under white light, at the duplicate capsule hanging beside her, and knew with absolute certainty that Pump 9 wasn't just a rescue point. It was the heart of whatever Black Ridge had been built to protect. Caleb felt the whole shape of the trap at once, and the worst part was that he had no clean move left. Pump 9 was not a room built to hold prisoners. It was built to process them. The duplicate silver capsule hanging beside Emily's restraint frame proved that much. Whatever Helena Sloane had buried inside Mila's life, the mountain had once buried the matching half inside her mother, and now the entire system was trying to close its fist around both of them before daylight ever touched the ridge. Ghost pressed low beside the jammed shutter, every line of his body begging to launch, while behind Caleb the children clustered in the curved tunnel with that awful silence frightened children fall into when they realize adults are about to fail in front of them. Mara saw the same thing Caleb did on the chamber floor, the transfer countdown running, Emily chained under white light, the hidden row of pods revealed inside the draining tank, and her face hollowed in a way that told him this was not new horror to her, only old horror finally given shape. "If the countdown hits 0, she said quietly, "the lower lift locks and the chamber dumps everything to the east spine." Caleb didn't look away from the gap. "Everything?" Mara swallowed. "Children, records, bodies, whichever category they're in tonight." Emily heard enough through the chamber echo to understand. because she stopped fighting the straps and shouted, "Caleb, don't come through the gate! The floor track is live!" That warning saved him a split second later when one of the recovery men, seeing him shift closer to the gap, slammed a gloved hand onto the rail panel and sent a blue current snapping across the steel floor lines in front of the cradle. The electricity danced in jagged forks over wet metal and vanished, but it told Caleb all he needed to know. One wrong leap into that room and he would drop in front of Emily without ever reaching her. Sloane's voice came back through the speakers, smooth and deadly. "You still think like a rescuer, Mr. Mercer. That is why you keep losing people." The line hit exactly where she wanted it to. Ryan, Emily, the years of false graves, the children behind him, Mila breathing in frightened little bursts with one hand buried in Ghost's fur. Caleb let the pain land, then shoved it somewhere colder. "Mara," he said, eyes still on the chamber. "Another way in." She scanned the pump room through the gap, following catwalks, pipe runs, maintenance ladders, all the architecture she had survived by memorizing. "Upper service bridge," she said at last. "Left wall, behind the drain manifold. If it hasn't been welded shut, it drops over the tank line." Caleb nodded once. He looked back at Eli and the older pipe boy. "You keep the little ones behind that bend no matter what happens. If anybody comes through this tunnel, you run the opposite direction until Ghost tells you otherwise." That last part should have sounded impossible. Instead, every child looked at the dog, and because Ghost was there, they believed him. Mila stepped closer before Caleb could stop her. "Don't leave her," she whispered. Caleb dropped to one knee in front of her, the red alarm light cutting across her small, frightened face and the silver chain at her throat. "I won't," he said. It was a promise too big to make in that mountain, but he made it anyway. Ghost touched his muzzle once to Mila's hand, then swung back toward the chamber, ready. Caleb and Mara peeled off left through a narrower maintenance slit hidden behind the tunnel seam, half crawling through wet pipe shadows while the countdown kept bleeding seconds through the speakers overhead. 23. 22. 21. The passage was barely wide enough for shoulders, and every foot they climbed the mountain trembled harder, dust raining from the joints like the place was grinding its own bones. Then they reached the upper bridge access, and Caleb's heart dropped. The hatch was not welded shut. It had been blown inward from the other side. Fresh blood streaked the frame. A body lay beyond it in the dark. Caleb rolled through with pistol up and found Ryan Cole on the catwalk floor, one hand pressed hard to his side, black shoulder patch dark with blood. For one frozen second neither man moved. Ryan's face in the dim emergency spill looked older than death should have allowed, but his eyes were clear, and they went straight to Caleb with something rawer than fear. "You're late," Ryan said through clenched teeth. Caleb almost laughed from the sheer violence of hearing his dead teammate sound alive. "You're alive. Not the useful part right now." Ryan dragged himself upright against the rail and pointed weakly down through the grating. From the upper bridge Caleb could finally see the entire chamber geometry. Emily below, the live rail floor, Sloane at the far control bank, 2 recovery men repositioning for the final transfer, and the hidden pods in the draining tank still sliding upward into view. But it was the third thing Ryan pointed to that turned hope into something uglier. Under the cradle platform, mounted in black housing against the support spine, sat a shaped charge array wired directly into the lift locks. "Sloane can't move both capsules if the chamber falls," Ryan said. "So if she loses control, she buries the room." Caleb felt the loss in that sentence before the explosion ever came. Because now he understood the truth of Part 6. The failure had already been built into the rescue. Save Emily, lose the children. Save the children, lose the capsules. Reach the room, and Sloane would turn the whole mountain into a grave before letting any of them leave with the truth. Below them, the countdown hit 10, and Emily, seeing movement above, lifted her head toward the catwalk just as Sloane followed her gaze and smiled. "There you are," she said softly. Then she pressed the second control, and the bridge under Caleb's boots unlocked with a deafening metallic crack. The bridge dropped 6 inches with a brutal metallic lurch, just enough to throw Caleb forward against the rail and nearly send Ryan sliding through the gap where the locking teeth had released. Mara caught the wounded man by the back of his vest and hauled him flat while sparks burst from the bridge joints, and the entire upper span began retracting into the wall, one grinding inch at a time. Below them, Sloane never even looked surprised. She had expected them on the catwalk. She had built the room for them. "You always climb," she said through the chamber speakers, her voice unnervingly calm as Emily fought the restraints under the cradle lights. "Men like you always choose height when they think they're taking control." Caleb ignored her. He dropped to one knee, reached under the service panel at the bridge base, and found the manual brake housing just as the span jerked again. His fingers hit frozen steel and stripped wiring. Wrong tools. Wrong angle. No time. Ryan rolled onto one elbow beside him, breathing hard through the pain in his side. "Red conduit," he said. "Cut the red, not the black. Black triggers the fail-safe." Caleb's head snapped toward him for half a second. "You know the bridge schematics." Ryan gave a short, ruined laugh. "You think they kept me alive to wash floors?" Another hard tremor shook the chamber, and below them one of the hidden pods inside the draining tank rose fully into view. It wasn't empty. A child lay curled inside under a thermal blanket, too still, for tape to one hand, face pale under the glass. Then another pod rose beside it. And another. The sight hit Caleb like a rifle stock to the chest. This wasn't one transfer room. It was inventory storage waiting for movement orders. Mara saw them too and went white with fury. "They were keeping backups," she whispered, and for the first time her voice broke, not from fear but from the sheer scale of what the mountain had been swallowing. Under them Emily twisted against the restraints and shouted up at Caleb. "Forget me! Kill the rails!" That was the old Emily in one sentence, sharp, reckless, still trying to save everyone by making herself disposable. Mila heard her mother's voice through the tunnel speaker bleed and cried out from somewhere behind the maintenance seam. "Mom!" The whole room reacted to that one sound. Emily froze. Sloane turned toward the tunnel with open hunger. The two recovery men moved instinctively to cover the side corridor instead of the cradle. And Ghost, still below the shutter with the children, exploded into barking fury that echoed through the chamber like a living alarm no system could silence. Caleb used the distraction. He found the red conduit, ripped away the insulation with his knife, and slashed through it just as the bridge tried to retract again. The span slammed to a stop mid-motion, hanging crooked and unstable over the tank line. "Move!" Ryan shouted. They did. Caleb, Mara, and Ryan sprinted across the half-seized bridge while bullets tore up from the floor and punched through the grating under their boots. Caleb jumped the final broken section, hit the far catwalk shoulder first, and rolled into a bank of valves. Mara landed hard beside him. Ryan almost didn't make it. His wounded leg buckled on the gap, but Caleb caught. There it was, small, black, tight against Sloane's throat under the edge of her white coat. One shot would kill her and Emily both. Below them the children were crying now, not loud, but in terrified, confused fragments that made the whole chamber feel smaller and crueler. Ghost's barking cut across it again, and then Mila's voice came clear through the side corridor. "I'm not hiding anymore!" Caleb turned just in time to see her appear at the tunnel mouth with the silver capsule clenched in one fist, Ghost glued to her side, Eli and the others behind her in shocked panic. Emily made a sound Caleb would hear in nightmares for the rest of his life. "Mila, no!" But Mila wasn't looking at Sloane. She was looking at the pods rising from the tank and the frightened children trapped behind the glass. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice came out steady in the impossible way some children become steady only after too much terror. "You said I was the package," she whispered. "Then why are there more?" For the first time since Caleb had seen her, Helena Sloane had no answer ready on her face. And in that one crack of silence, Ryan Cole looked at Mila, then at the duplicate capsule hanging beside Emily's cradle, and finally at Caleb with the expression of a man who had run out of places to bury the ugliest truth. "Because she's not the only Vance child," he said. The sentence hit the chamber like a blast wave. For one impossible second even the alarms seemed to pull back from it. Mila stood at the tunnel mouth with Ghost pressed against her leg, the silver capsule shaking in her fist, while Emily stared at Ryan as if the last piece of her life had just been torn open in public. "What did you say?" Caleb asked, but his voice barely sounded human. Ryan didn't look at him. He was looking at the rising pods in the tank, at the pale child curled behind the glass, at the duplicate capsule hanging beside Emily's restrained frame, and at Sloane, who had finally lost that awful calm. "The program didn't build redundancy around data," Ryan said. "It built redundancy around bloodlines. Mila was never the only carrier. Emily wasn't either." Emily's face went white. "No," she whispered, but the way she said it told Caleb she already knew some part of the answer and had spent years refusing to give it a name. Ghost growled low, reading the room faster than any of them, his body angled between Mila and every adult who had ever lied to her. Sloane moved first. She slammed one hand onto the control bank and the hidden tank pods behind the glass began rising faster, gears screaming, red warning lights strobing over small still faces. "You've all seen too much," she said, and this time there was no mask left in her voice. "Recovery priority is the Vance package. The rest become archival loss." One of the recovery men lunged for Mila from the tunnel side. Ghost hit him mid-step and drove him into the rail wall so hard the man's weapon spun away into the runoff. Caleb fired twice at the second man, catching him high in the chest and shoulder, but the chamber was already breaking into separate disasters. Emily twisted against the cradle until blood ran down both wrists. Mara vaulted the lower rail and slid toward the control station, trying to reach the pod release overrides. Eli dragged the younger children back toward the tunnel while shouting for them to stay low. Ryan went for Sloane, but she saw him coming and triggered the chamber defense grid. Blue current exploded across the wet floor rails again, forcing him sideways and hurling sparks into the standing water. Mila screamed as the nearest pod locked fully upright, and the child inside slapped one hand weakly against the glass. Caleb saw the wristband through the red light, and felt the air leave his lungs all over again. Vance. Another one. Another child with his family name trapped in a glass chamber under a mountain built on graves and lies. "Caleb!" Mara shouted. "The capsules are the key." He turned. She had ripped open the lower control housing and exposed a black biometric dock hidden beneath the rail panel. It had 2 narrow slots, not 1. 2. Emily saw it too and finally stopped fighting the restraints. "They paired us," she said, horror hollowing her voice. "Mother line and child line." Sloane fired at Mara and missed by inches. Ghost ripped free of the first recovery man and spun toward the shot, snarling through the water. Ryan hit Sloane from the side before she could fire again, and both of them crashed into the control bank hard enough to crack the main screen. The chamber lights dipped, surged, then went blood red. Somewhere deep in the mountain, a deeper collapse boom rolled through the structure and one of the catwalk supports sheared loose with a sound like a tree snapping in winter. Water burst from a fractured pump pipe overhead and slammed into the chamber in a freezing white sheet, scattering shell casings, syringes, glass, and children's cries into one violent roar. Mila dropped to one knee but kept hold of the capsule. Caleb reached her, grabbed her shoulder, and shouted over the chaos. "Give it to me!" She looked up at him through tears and spray, terrified but suddenly stubborn in a way that hurt to see because it came straight from Emily. "If I let go, they'll take it," she said. Behind the glass, the second Vance child lifted her head fully for the first time and looked straight at Mila as if she somehow understood the shape of the moment. Then Emily found her voice and screamed the words that turned the whole chamber into a knife edge. "Mila, the other girl is your sister!" Everything stopped inside Caleb for one fatal beat. Not the gunfire. Not the alarms. Not the collapsing mountain. Just him. Because in that single sentence the room had gone from rescue to bloodline, from black site horror to family torn into pieces and stored in pods like insurance. And Sloane, half pinned under Ryan but still reaching, smiled through blood and said, "Now choose which daughter leaves the mountain alive." Caleb did not answer Sloane, and that silence was the first smart thing anyone had done in the chamber since the truth broke open. Because the moment she forced the choice into words, he finally saw the trap beneath the emotion. This room had never been designed to save one child. It had been designed to make a parent choose, to split instinct, to weaponize love until the strongest person in the room did exactly what the system wanted. One daughter alive, one daughter buried, and the mountain keeping the rest. No, Caleb said, low and absolute, the word cutting through alarms, water, and panic alike. Sloane laughed through blood where Ryan still fought to hold her down against the shattered control bank. Then you lose both. Not if the room needs 2 bloodline keys, Mara shouted from the open panel, one arm buried in wiring while sparks bit across her sleeve. The capsules don't pick one child. They authenticate the line. Emily heard it and understood instantly. Her face changed from horror into something sharper, older, maternal in the most dangerous way. Mila, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice while blood ran from the restraint cuts at her wrists. Bring the capsule here. Mila's eyes were huge, locked between the glass pod where the other Vance girls stared back and the adults tearing themselves apart under red light. Ghost made the decision before fear could. He pressed hard against Mila's legs, then turned and drove her forward in 2 urgent shoves toward Emily's cradle, while Eli dragged the younger children behind a fallen rail brace and Ryan kept Sloane's gun wrist off the trigger by sheer will. Caleb sprinted with Mila, one arm around her shoulders, rounds snapping off metal behind them as the surviving recovery man crawled for his rifle in the runoff. Ghost saw it, broke off for one savage burst, and hit the man in the throat and shoulder hard enough to pin him flat before he could fire. At the cradle, Emily twisted her body just enough to expose the duplicate silver capsule hanging beside her under the restraint frame. Both, she said. Together. Caleb grabbed Emily's chain with one hand and Mila's trembling fist with the other, then slammed both capsules into the 2 narrow biometric slots Mara had exposed beneath the rail controls. For one terrible second nothing happened. Then the chamber went dead still. The alarms cut out. The current vanished from the floor rails. The tank lights shifted from red to white. And every locked pod in the glass wall behind them released at once with a deep, echoing sequence of mechanical clacks that sounded almost like breath returning to buried lungs. Sloane stopped fighting. Not from surrender. From shock. No, she whispered, and for the first time since Caleb had seen her, she looked genuinely afraid. Mara drove both hands into the panel and ripped the release lever downward. The glass pod seals blew open in a rush of vapor and pressure, and the second Vance girl collapsed forward into the runoff, coughing and gasping, alive. Emily made a sound that was half sob, half animal cry, and Caleb lunged through the water to catch the child before she struck the rail edge. Up close she was Mila's mirror in all the ways that mattered, same eyes, same brow, same impossible smallness under too much history. I've got you, he said, though he didn't know which child he was speaking to anymore. The chamber should have broken toward hope then. Instead the mountain answered with a deeper concussion than anything before it. The main pump well behind the cradle ruptured. Water blasted upward through the central spine in a black roaring column, smashing catwalk supports and tearing one of the overhead lines free. The entire room lurched sideways. Children screamed. Eli lost his footing and slammed into the wall. Ryan threw himself across Sloane just as the control bank behind them exploded in sparks and shrapnel. Mara shouted something Caleb couldn't hear over the water. Ghost barked wildly, trying to gather both Mila and her sister into one moving shape. And then the near-resolution twist finally came, through the broken speaker above the chamber, calm as winter and more terrible than Sloane had ever been. A male voice filled the room. Primary archive secured, it said. Collapse will continue. Caleb froze because he knew that voice. Not Ryan. Not Pike. Not any man on the ridge. It was Sheriff Nolan Pike. The man who had almost died beside the hatch. The man Caleb had trusted to hold the surface. The man who had just revealed he had never been outside this operation at all. And as the mountain started coming down for real, Pike's voice added one final line that turned the entire rescue into a new betrayal. "Mercer, if you want the children alive, bring me the capsules." Caleb did not give Helena Sloane the choice she wanted, and that was the moment the mountain finally began to lose. He looked from Mila to the second Vance girl behind the glass, to Emily bleeding against the cradle, to Ghost standing broad and shaking in the freezing runoff with his teeth bared at every adult who had ever tried to turn a child into a locked container, and something inside him went cold and clean. "I'm not choosing," he said. Sloane laughed through blood, but the sound broke when Emily twisted her wrist hard enough to tear skin and shouted, "The doc takes both capsules at once!" Mara heard it from the shattered control housing and slammed her palm against the exposed rail, dragging herself through water and sparks to the black biometric cradle beneath the panel. Ryan, half on top of Sloane and half falling apart from his wounds, caught Caleb's eye and understood the plan before a word passed between them. "Get them to the dock," he said. "I'll hold her." It was the old Ryan then, the one Caleb had followed into hell before the lies, before the reports, before the dead paper version of him replaced the breathing man. Sloane understood too late. She drove an elbow into Ryan's throat, reached for the pistol in the runoff, and Ghost launched through the red light like the mountain itself had given him one last order. He hit her shoulder, not to kill, but to throw her line off the weapon long enough for Caleb to move. Caleb scooped Mila with one arm, grabbed the duplicate capsule from beside Emily's restraint frame with the other, and shoved both silver pieces into Mara's hands. "Tell me what to do." Mara rammed them into the twin slots under the panel. For one terrible second nothing happened. Then the black dock flashed green, and every sealed pod in the chamber unlocked at once with a chain of metallic cracks that sounded almost like gunfire. The little girl behind the Vance glass slammed forward into the opening pod door coughing and crying, and suddenly there were children moving everywhere. Not like cargo now, but like survivors waking inside their own bodies. Emily saw the girl and broke in a way Caleb had no language for. "Nora!" she breathed, and the name changed the room. Mila stared from Caleb's arms to the girl stumbling free of the pod, and even in the middle of alarms and water and collapsing steel she understood. A sister. Real. Hidden. Alive. Mara hit the manual release on Emily's cradle. The restraints snapped open. Emily fell forward and Caleb caught her just before her knees hit the flooded floor. For one breath they only stared at each other, brother and sister, and all the stolen years standing between them like broken glass. But there was no space left for grief to sit down because the mountain boomed again, louder this time, and one of the pump columns split open from top to bottom. Steam and black water burst sideways through the chamber. Sloane screamed at the recovery men to seal the east lift, but Ryan fired twice into the overhead track and sent the steel carriage crashing down across the rail line, cutting her off from the transfer exit she had been protecting since the first lie was spoken on Black Ridge. "Move!" he roared at Caleb. "Now!" Caleb wanted to drag him too. Wanted to drag all of it into daylight. Ryan, the records, the pods, the proof, the years he had lost. But then Nora, shaking and barefoot and barely more than a shadow under the red strobes, reached for Mila with one trembling hand, and Emily took both girls against her chest while Ghost circled them in the water, staggering from exhaustion but still guarding, and Caleb knew what had to live first. Mara gathered the remaining children and forced them toward the high-maintenance rise behind the pump column while Eli and the older kids helped the smallest ones keep their feet. Sloane got up one more time. That was the part Caleb remembered later, not her cruelty, not her voice, but her refusal to stop trying to own the room even while it was dying around her. She ripped a backup detonator from inside her coat and aimed it not at Caleb, not at Mara, but at the children. Ryan saw it too. He didn't hesitate. He drove into her full force, and together they crashed through the fractured catwalk rail and vanished into the black churn of the lower pump well below. Sloane's detonator discharged harmlessly into the spray as they fell. Caleb heard Emily cry out, heard Mila scream, heard Ghost bark with a raw, shattered fury that made every child in the chamber flinch, but there was no time to look over the edge because the entire western wall of Pump 9 gave way in a grinding avalanche of concrete and support struts. The only open route left was the high-rise tunnel Mara had found. So Caleb put one hand on Emily's back, one on Eli's shoulder, and drove the whole living line upward into the failing mountain. The climb was brutal. The tunnel narrowed until adults had to crouch and children had to be pushed upward one by one through freezing runoff, while dust rained from every seam. Nora nearly slipped twice before Ghost shoved himself under her and kept her moving. Mila never let go of Emily's sleeve. Mara, pale and shaking and running on something harsher than strength, kept counting the children over and over in a whisper that sounded like prayer and inventory at the same time. Behind them, Black Ridge tore itself open in sections, each concussion hotter and closer than the last. At one bend the tunnel split, and Caleb saw old painted arrows leading toward east drain and vent access, the exact kind of false choice architecture men built when they wanted survivors to die in predictable places. But Ghost never even looked at the drain route. He lunged toward the vertical vent shaft as if he had known from the first pawprint in the snow where this night had to end. That was the thing that would stay with Caleb longer than the gunfire and blood and lost years. The dog never doubted the truth, only the people hiding it. So Caleb trusted him. They climbed. Emily pushed the smallest children first. Eli lifted Nora when her legs failed. Mara braced Mila's feet on the ladder. Caleb stayed below, one hand on Ghost's harness, one shoulder under the next child, taking the weight nobody else could take because that was all he had ever wanted from redemption anyway, to carry something all the way out this time. By the time the first child reached open air, dawn had started bleeding gray over Black Ridge. Cold mountain wind poured down the vent like a blessing and a warning together. One by one the children emerged into the snow. Emily came up holding Mila and Nora both, shaking so hard Caleb thought she might fall back in, but she stayed upright. Mara followed next, then Eli, then the rest. Caleb was last except for Ghost. He turned once at the mouth of the shaft and looked back into the collapsing red dark below, half expecting Ryan to appear through smoke and steal one more time just to deny death again. But nothing came except the final deep groan of the mountain preparing to bury its machinery forever. Then Ghost climbed up beside him, blood on his fur, legs trembling, eyes still searching the treeline as if danger might yet rise out of the snow. The ridge gave way 10 seconds later. The eastern shelf of Black Ridge sagged inward with a thunder that rolled across the valley and sent snow, stone, and old concrete plumes exploding into the dawn. What had been hidden under the mountain did not vanish cleanly. That was Justice's first shape. Rusted vents, broken rails, pod glass, steel teeth, and sections of the transfer spine tore loose and surfaced through the collapse, enough that no honest report could bury it again. Pike reached them with state units and medics 5 minutes after that, face white with shock, because when he had fallen back he had chosen, finally, to believe Caleb instead of bury him. Caleb barely heard anything Pike said. He was kneeling in the snow in front of Mila and Nora while Emily stood behind them with both hands on their shoulders, unable to stop touching them as if the truth might disappear if she did. Mila looked at him first. Nora followed a second later, slower, uncertain but trying. 2 girls. Same bloodline. Same mountain. Same impossible morning. Emily's voice broke when she finally spoke his name. "I'm sorry it took this long." Caleb looked up at his sister, at the years stolen from both of them, at the daughters the mountain had hidden, at Mara alive, Eli alive, the children huddled in rescue blankets, and Ghost pressing his body against all of them like one last living wall. "You're here now," he said, and it was not forgiveness, not fully, not yet, but it was the first true thing the morning had given them after a lifetime of lies. Later there would be statements, graves reopened, sealed files dragged into court, men in expensive coats learning that mountains do not keep every secret forever. Later there would be mourning for Ryan, because this time Caleb would not let anyone decide that his life could be folded into a neat dead report and filed away. But on that ridge, in the pale winter light, what mattered first was smaller and bigger at once. Mila stepped into him. Nora followed after one frightened pause. Caleb put both arms around both girls, and Ghost sat down beside them in the snow with his head against Caleb's shoulder, as if he had been carrying this ending in his chest from the first second he froze at those buried pawprints. No one had backed the Navy SEAL on Black Ridge. Not the sheriff. Not the search teams. Not the reports. Not the dead. But a German shepherd had, and in the end that was enough to rip open a mountain, pull children into daylight, and drag one broken family back from the dark.